Mike Johnson has been given his marching orders to continue down this drumbeat of demonizing regular Americans who are sick of this. But the worst part is he still doesn't know that everyone knows he's a dishonest, evil person. Here he is trying it again.
Tomorrow, the Democrat leaders are going to join for a big party out on the National Mall. They're going to descend on our Capitol for their much-anticipated so-called No Kings rally. We refer to it by its more accurate description, the Hate America rally, okay? And I'm not sure how anybody can refute that. If you think about what's going to happen here tomorrow, you're going to bring together the Marxists, the socialists, the Antifa advocates, the anarchists, and the pro-Hamas wing of the far-left Democrat Party. That is the modern Democratic Party. That's where they've gone. And the Hate America rally is the common theme among all those groups. Listen to the language they use themselves. Many of them don't like living in America. They hate capitalism. They hate our free enterprise system. They hate our principles. They hate the ideas that we come in to work every day to fight for, to preserve, in the greatest nation in the history of the world. They hate the idea of individual freedom and limited government. They hate the idea of the rule of law. They fight against it all the time. They hate the idea of peace through strength. They lobby against it all the time. Individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, human dignity, the things that lead to human flourishing, the things that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. They're opposed to law enforcement. They're opposed to military. And their votes show it over and over. That's the collection of voices that you'll hear tomorrow that the Democrats will go out and raise their hands with and cheer with.
They don't care that the majority of folks who are going to be out there, the majority of the folks who can't make it out there or refuse to go out there, still have the same feelings about the things that this administration and this fascist MAGA party is up to. They think they can just keep talking and heaping all of these insults on folks, and that somehow that's going to convince people that know reality to somehow change their minds. How does that work? It works in a fascist administration that only wants to suppress people's voices. Matter of fact, he actually tried to go down that route too, to talk about how they're the ones that are pushing for First Amendment rights.
Now, obviously, every American has every right to exercise their First Amendment freedoms. I'm personally a big advocate of that. I spent the first 20 years of my legal career in the federal courts before I came to Congress defending the right to free speech. They have the right to do it. Republicans, by the way, are the party that fights to maximize your liberty. And we believe, just as our founders did, that every American has been endowed by God himself with unalienable rights, and that includes the rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. But tomorrow, this rally is not about freedom. It's about the opposite. For many of our Democrat colleagues, tomorrow is about creating really a spectacle. That's what they've been doing here every day of the shutdown, with their little TikTok videos and their publicity stunts. And they're going to do it in a much larger venue tomorrow. And as the shutdown drags on, it's becoming increasingly clear that this spectacle is the reason the Democrats have refused to reopen the government. Just read a sample of the materials that this organizing group has circulated far and wide about the event tomorrow. They distributed talking points cheering on the shutdown. I mean, they're urging this on. They love this. They're cheering on Chuck Schumer's decision to close the government, and their lead organizer said this. This is his words, not mine. Quote, "He hasn't surrendered yet. I call that progress." Maybe that's what led Chuck Schumer to say that every day of the shutdown gets better for us. That's what he said. Since then, Democrats have had their 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th opportunities to reopen the government, and they have obeyed the mob. They have listened to that. On Wednesday, this is pretty ominous. I don't know if anybody's reported on this, but you should. The lead organizer of tomorrow's event issued an open threat to Democrats in Washington, and this is what he said, quote, "The cavalry is coming in on October 18th, and they're either going to be celebrating you or they're going to be calling for new leadership in the Democrat Party." Now, I know who heard that. Chuck Schumer heard it. Hakeem Jeffries heard it. And their actions and their votes show that they are taking that as an order.
Mike Johnson is afraid. Mike Johnson is afraid of new leadership in the Democratic Party. Mike Johnson and all these guys that have been talking about how the Democratic leadership has been feckless and they're not doing anything. Guess who was saying that before? the majority of Democrats, this new wave of younger Democrats that are sick of them bowing down and kowtowing to people like Mike Johnson. He's afraid of that change. So therefore, he's mischaracterizing it to being, oh, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are afraid. Well, they fucking better be, because they've been doing nothing but allowing him and this president to run roughshod over the Constitution. Before this president came in, allowing this party to continue to keep talking about how they're the fiscal responsible party without coming in and literally telling them to their face, I'm going to give you guys some facts. So look at how Chuck Schumer and them are acting. Look at how Hakeem Jeffries is now acting, putting on stunts where he's in the middle of the Capitol confronting these guys now. That's how pressure works. But he's going to talk about how there's going to be this mob out there. No mention of January 6th when they literally ran up. He's talking about law enforcement, disrespect for law enforcement as they ran up and assaulted law enforcement officers. They don't want you to remember the reality of everything that they do. They want you to listen to their mischaracterizations of what it is that they want you to believe about this division that they have. And they've been pushing since that orange sumbitch came down that escalator. It's the first thing that he did. Did you guys see what Jeff Merkley said about what it is that they were setting up in Portland as Donald Trump was lying about the insurrectionists that are there and the Antifas and all the fighting and riots that are happening that absolutely were not happening?
And what happened in Portland a few nights ago, and it's recorded by Oregon Public Broadcasting, was that they staged a fake riot. They marched peaceful protesters 3 blocks and then had a line across the road. They had professional videographers behind them, and then they threw down pepper balls, flashbangs, which sound like gunfire going off, and tear gas. And of course, when you put tear gas, everybody moves, and it looks like you have some kind of a riot going on. Totally fake. This is the first time I know of, at least in my lifetime, that the federal government has faked a riot in order to try to justify, if you will, the Insurrection Act being invoked.
So people who want this to continue to go down, these fake riots or these sparking of riots, the tear gas being tossed around to make that image of a riot happen that was detailed there by Senator Jeff Merkley, they want you to not believe him. So if someone says, well, he's lying, ask them why they believe anything that this MAGA administration says. They lie every day. We've seen that Kristi Noem go around to these cities and have a camera crew and show her standing over the edge of a building being tough. We've seen her stand in front of between these 2 Border Patrol agents with the guns saying, we're going to get those illegals today. Everything they do is a setup. Why would that not be the case? So I saw this one content creator. His name is Chris Valenti. I've played him before when he was talking about Trump and Hegseth going to stand in front of the military and tell them that they need to be loyal to them, which after he said that, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth stood in front of the military and said that they need to be loyal to them. I decided to bring him back up because he had some thoughts about what it is that's potentially happening tomorrow all over the country, but probably specifically in D.C.
Donald Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807 on October 18th, 2025 during the No King's Day protest. It will be the largest protest in American history, followed up by the invocation of the Insurrection Act of 1807. They will claim that any and all protesters were actually members of Antifa. The FBI, the CIA, and ICE will be embedded at the protests, ready to detain as many people as possible. This is how they start labeling any dissenters of the regime as Antifa. Welcome to the end. Please come back here when I'm right. I always am.
Chris Valenti is not short on confidence in his predictions. But you know what? As he talks about this plan to continue to label folks that they don't like as Antifa and Democrats as a terrorist organization, it's weird because he's saying that even though we've already heard Stephen Miller and those types talk about how Democrats are a terrorist party. They support anarchy. They've been setting up this propaganda and these characterizations of folks for months so they can get to this point. But you know what? Maybe Chris Valenti talks a little bit too forcefully. Maybe he cussed a little bit too harshly at the end. You don't have to believe Chris Valenti talking about how they plan to invoke the Insurrection Act. You don't have to listen to him. You know what? You could listen to the guy who's the vice president of the United States, who weirdly, is in favor of them invoking the Insurrection Act.
ABC News is reporting that the administration has been seriously discussing invoking the Insurrection Act. That would give the president the power to direct federal troops to conduct law enforcement functions in the case of a national emergency. Is that the case? Are you seriously considering invoking the Insurrection Act?
Well, the president's looking at all of his options. Right now, he hasn't felt he needed to, but we have to remember, why are we talking about this, Kristen? Because crime has gotten out of control in our cities, because our ICE agents, the people who are enforcing our immigration laws, have faced a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against them. The problem here is not the Insurrection Act or whether we actually invoke it or not. The problem is the fact that the entire media in this country, cheered on by a few far-left lunatics, have made it okay to tee off on American law enforcement. Yeah. We cannot accept that in the United States of America.
But is there a rebellion here? That's what would trigger an Insurrection Act. Is it imminent?
Kristen, crime is down in Chicago and Portland often because they're so overwhelmed at the local level, they're not even keeping the statistics properly.
J.D. Vance said they're open to options of invoking the Insurrection Act. That's kind of an answer and a window into what it is that they would like to do. It's weird that they keep admitting everything that they're denying at the same time. But he also tried to downplay it. I mean, I don't think the issue here, Kristen, is that we're going to invoke the insurrection. I think the issue here is that you guys keep talking about how we want to invoke the Insurrection Act. So he brought up Chicago. Of course, J.B. Pritzker is the governor of that state of Illinois. And he brought it up too. And he decided to talk about this same thing. J.B. Pritzker used terms like, I'm concerned that he's going to do things like this. He exaggerates things. He openly and blatantly lies. He does not exaggerate. He makes things up. And if you're concerned, I love the concern. I love that he's pointing it out. Sometimes I guess I'm cautious in these criticisms of these higher level Democrats that actually say the right things. I'm waiting for the next part where he says, and this is what we're going to do. If you're concerned about him invoking the Insurrection Act, Joe Schmo that's from the Chicago area that's going to be out there, he can't do anything about it. He doesn't have a platform to then go talk about how we're going to push back on this, or ways that we can use our power and influence to push back on this, ways that you can actually take control of things and say, this isn't going to happen because this is our response to a fascist that continues to run up in our cities. And his next excuse is the Insurrection Act. Stop being concerned and worried and afraid and do something. Again, maybe I'm way out of pocket and I don't know what it is that you can do. I've said it before. I don't run a state. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. Don't be afraid to go out. Just also, don't be afraid to identify the agitators that are in those crowds. Don't be afraid to identify the people that are going to be there trying to start things in uniform to get riots going so they can claim that that's what's happening.